So let us virtually or really get started.
Oh, one more thing I do need to add. I finally got to see my brother and my son yesterday because we haven't seen each other for a while.
Oh, nice.
Good. Joe came on. What page are we on?
And Arnie, I did tell Joe that you had asked about him.
Thank you.
What page are we on?
Mission 2. Yes.
235, I believe.
335.
Indeed, 245. Mishnah 2. So we're just zooming along here. Okay. So the previous Mishnah introduced us to this amorphous group called Anshei Knesset Hagdolah, the members of the Great Assembly. And our second Mishnah begins, Shimon HaTzadik Haya Mishayrei Knesset Hagdolah. Shimon the righteous was one of the last remaining members of the Great Assembly. Since we know very little about the Great Assembly, it's hard to know why it was sort of petering out, but clearly this was a period of transition, and we are going to be shortly introduced to what are called the zugot. A zug is a pair, and in this context, the zug refers to the president of the Sanhedrin and the Av Beis Din, well, we'll call him vice president, even though that's not exactly his official capacity. I guess chairman of the board. He was sort of responsible for the administrative function of the Sanhedrin, right? But we'll kick that to Mishnah 3. But Shimon HaTzadik and his cohort, who will read about Mishnah 3, are at the end of that era. And part of what I think he's trying to do is grapple with transition. You know, transitional moments tend to make people somewhat conservative, right? The more tumultuous the transitional moment, the more one wants to hold on to the known and the familiar. So park that sort of in the back of your brain, because I think that is an important part of what he is thinking and trying to do. Right? And Shimon HaTzadik was wont to say regularly, this was sort of like, you asked him a question, you got this answer, and then maybe the answer to your question. This was his mantra, if you will, right? The world stands on 3 things: on the Torah, and on the worship service in the temple, and on the performance of deeds of loving kindness. Those are the 3 pillars. By the way, when we get to the end of chapter 1, you're going to see a different sage who starts, the world stands on 3 things, and is going to give us 3 different ones. Right? And we can talk then as to why he wasn't satisfied with Shimon HaTzadik's version. Right? So, what are these? What do these 3 things connote? Right? Torah. He uses the word avodah, which we'll explore different aspects of in a moment. Avodah, like the avodah service on Yom Kippur, which regales us with the service that the Kohen Gadol performed on Yom Kippur in order to achieve atonement for himself, his family, and the Jewish people. And deeds of loving kindness, which is the most amorphous of the three. So, let's start with Torah. On one level, it's kind of obvious. What else would the Jewish world stand on if not Torah?
Love of God.
We're not warm, fuzzy people.
I'm sorry, but I would say love of God.
No, I heard enough of that yesterday. Thank you.
No, but that was-
Amen.
Amen. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
I'm white.
Don't be hurt. Yesterday was
There
very.
was a Baptist funeral we went to, that's why I sang that, and there was this love of all the, that was
Richard's mother, we went to.
Oh, did you?
and that's why, it was a Baptist funeral that you talk about.
Hey, Bill.
Hi, Rabbi. If we didn't have Torah, maybe we could stand on the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
Only if you want to be a good Christian.
If you stand on one leg. it's-
Remember, the Christians got rid of the Torah and only embraced the Ten Commandments. And just in case you missed it, check out, courts in Louisiana and classrooms in Oklahoma and Texas and a handful of other places. It's one of the defining distinctions, and I'm being a little bit flip, but not entirely. But Christianity rejected Torah essentially, other than those elements that were used to undergird Christian belief.
If I could go back a second,
Oh,
other than the flip line. For me, it's three loves: love of God, love of family, and love of country. And that's what comes out of the 60s, out of the 40s, and that's what I learned. And do I believe it? Yes.
Okay.
So come back, even though you did the joke thing about love yesterday. For me, before Torah comes the love of God.
Love is fickle.
In what way?
Wow.
I said love is fickle. In what way? It ebbs and it flows. You are of an era where celebrating 50th wedding anniversaries, as long as one is hale and healthy, is much more ubiquitous.
Okay.
My introduction to marriage in rabbinical school was, gentlemen, and at the time the professor could say that because there were not yet women in rabbinical school. Gentlemen, just know that 1 out of every 3 marriages you officiate at won't last. That's not a good way to start the subject.
Does that prove true for you?
I can't really say because I haven't been able to track all the marriages that I've done. But I will say that I have a friend that I've known since literally we were thrown into a crib together, and he was the first one who blew up my record because he divorced, he and his wife got a divorce. So there's a certain potential ephemerality to that. Torah speaks about obligations
Okay.
and expectations in the same way that a ketubah, which we talk about as a Jewish marriage document, right? But it's a contract. And part of the contract sets forth the duties, responsibilities, and obligations of the husband to the wife and the wife to the husband. And when I meet with couples, I talk to them about, okay, let's translate this into a modern idiom. What are the obligations and responsibilities that you as a contemporary spouse have to your partner? Because you may love your wife all the time, but you may not always act that way. You know, by the way, I make strange connections sometimes. So have you ever watched the TV show, The Big Bang Theory?
Oh, yes.
It's an excellent show. Enjoyed it tremendously. And if you remember, Sheldon was always creating contracts. He had the roommate agreement, he had the dating agreement, and he had the marriage agreement. He governed himself by these agreements. In part because it was a way of compensating for his lack of sometimes picking up on the cues that others would. And, you know, it's like, I know I have to do this. I'm going to put it in the contract, and that way it spells out exactly what I got to do when. But so does the ketubah. Maybe not quite the detail that Sheldon microscopically went to, but it's the same idea. If I truly want to show my affection, I'm going to do it behaviorally. Whether I think of that as an expression of love or not. Right? Give me a second, Arnie, then you can rebut.
I love everybody.
Right? What do we know about our Israelite ancestors throughout the biblical period?
Rebelled.
They were rebellious, they were fickle, they chased after foreign gods who were insubstantial. Phenomenologically, they are, and by the way, the prophets use infidelity to describe their behavior routinely. Love God. How do I express that? How do I translate that into behaviors which would be recognizable?
Performance of the commandments.
Okay, so in order to love God, therefore I have to study the Torah in order to know how to behave in order to manifest my love of God. Okay, I'm stopping.
It's the wrong, I know the word love, okay. Let me say this a different way. To me, unwavering faith in God. Even in the worst of times. Even in the worst of times, you don't lose your faith and you don't curse God.
Okay, so it's very Jovian.
I know that, that's where it comes from. I mean, that's that idea comes from. Do I believe that? The answer is yes. If I did not have my faith in God, I probably wouldn't have a foundation to stand on.
I won't disagree with faith as a pillar. But too many people don't. And I think Shimon Hatzadik would argue that you get it by behaving in ways that create opportunities for building faith.
Okay,
I think that's what he would say.
okay.
Since he's not here, I can only speculate, but the challenge is without the behavioral part of it, I don't know that people maintain faith.
I would agree with that.
Or if they, or their faith is situational. You know, what's the old quip about there are no atheists in foxholes?
Yeah.
Right, well, that's an imperfect faith at best.
That's situational.
You know, it's like, I forget the name of the movie. There's a guy who falls overboard and he starts swimming to shore. And when he's far from shore, he promises God everything under the sun. And as he gets closer and closer, he winnows down the promise to the point where he's now on shore, and he's going like, oh, okay, thanks, see ya. There's no substance. It's like it's a faith that is rooted in expectation. Like, what are you gonna do for me? You may not, but there's a lot of people who do. And that's part of why prayer is broken for many people. Because if I approach prayer, and I'm sort of slipping into the next category, because for avodah, for him is worship in the temple, but avodah clearly also becomes worship in a broader sense, which comes to include prayer. Okay? If prayer is some sort of liturgical slot machine, then guess what? I'm going to be perpetually disappointed. Right? I can pray from now till forever. I'm never going to be 6 feet tall. And there was a time in my life when I really wanted to be taller than I was. And it wasn't, and it was purely because I would have been better on the ice. And I get it. And I have to say, I kind of watched Jonathan go through some of the same stuff. But he could pray as much as he wanted, but he wasn't going to get an extra few inches in response to that. I told him he should have chosen taller parents. Yeah, he laughed at me when I said that too.
You can't fight the genes.
You can't fight the gene.
I'll have to write that down. Okay.
All right, but you can't, but the reality is,
Yes.
okay, hold on a second, Rhoda, I see your hand. If prayer is reduced to requests which go unmet, you stop doing it because you've been doing it wrong in the first place. So we'll come back to talk more about prayer, but understand that it's connected to faith. If I believe that God will do all these things for me and God doesn't, well, then I toss everything. You know, if I expect that God is going to perform the miraculous for me, then I'm setting myself up for disappointment and God for failure. And maybe I need to change how I look at worship. Rhoda, I haven't forgotten about you.
Yes.
I don't see your hand.
Right. I was going to say that a common prayer that a lot of people don't actually say anymore is that they pray over the sex of a upcoming child, because once conception has taken place, that's a decision that has been made.
Well, yes. I mean, in fact, the rabbis use that as an example of prayers that are in vain.
Right. Okay, got it.
Because once it's done, it's done. You know, it's not gonna, you know, there's not gonna be some divine hand that goes in there and goes, oh. Let's change one of those X's to a Y, or, you know, vice versa. In the same way that they use the example of, you know, if you see a fire burning in your town, too late to pray that it's not your house. You may pray for people to be safe. There are many prayers that you could do at that moment, but wherever the fire is, the fire is. And I remember, you know, saying, I'm not sure, you know, and until when I was an undergrad at JTS, we're walking home from shul on Friday night, and there's smoke coming out of a building on our street. And I have no doubt that there were any number of people who were praying that it wasn't our building. But it was. So so the prayer was sort of pointless. Maybe the prayer ought to have been, I hope nobody's hurt. I hope the firemen were able to find my roommate who took a nap instead of coming to shul that Friday night because he was really tired, and he was woken up by a fireman saying, please get out of the building. Now, fortunately, we were on a side of the building that was minimally affected or less affected, but praying for him to be safe would have been a better prayer, or that everybody's safe without not knowing whether it's our building or not. Yeah, so prayer for things that are immutable, unchangeable, are purposeless blessings in some prayers in some way. Go ahead, ask the question.
Why do you have any more control over being safe or not? He either was safe or he wasn't safe. Isn't that the same as either was your building or wasn't your building?
No, because there are a whole lot of other factors that would come into play in his safety,
Maybe he was asleep and didn't wake up.
including the firemen finding him and waking him up because they went door to door, as opposed to we saw the smoke coming out of a building. The building was already on fire. His safety was an open question. The safety of other people in the building was an open question. That was not an immutable fact.
That you knew.
Well, but the building was already on fire. His safety was undecided. Just because the building was on fire doesn't mean that he was safe or that he was not safe. Did he hear the alarm? No, actually, he slept through the alarm. God bless Truly, he could sleep through pretty much anything.
That would have been, not that would have been
inappropriate
to wish.
And there are times when we pray for things that
No,
still
that's
mean,
negative. I would not think that we should bring.
guys, Rhoda, Bill,
So,
if you're gonna have a side conversation, I'm gonna have to ask you to mute, please.
okay, I meant to mute, but my husband did have something he wanted to say. Go ahead, repeat it.
Well, if you didn't like your roommate, Rabbi, would it have been wrong for you to then wish the guy had been harmed? If you didn't like the dude?
No, you would not pray for someone to be harmed. That I think is unworthy of prayer and unworthy of you.
I agree. Thank you.
You may not, you don't have to like your roommate all the time to not want him to be harmed. And Shirley and I, we got along okay. We were totally different people, but we got along okay because maybe because we were totally different and we just stayed out of each other's way a lot. Right. So the question nobody asked is, about Mishaberach. We often invoke God in prayer, even when we know people have terminal diseases.
Do that every day.
So why? Well, go why? Barbara.
I learned something a long time ago from one of the members of our congregation who's not here today, but usually is. And he taught me to pray for God to be merciful.
On one level, that is what we're praying for. We're praying for divine mercy. Sometimes divine mercy manifests as healing. Sometimes it manifests as strengthening the person who's going through whatever difficulties they're going through. Sometimes it manifests as strengthening the person who's helping along the way. There could be any number of responses, but if the response I expect is miraculous, then I'm not being realistic. That's why we pray, we can pray for strength for ourselves to help. We can pray for strength and ease for the person who is suffering. There are any number of pathways that our prayer could take or be answered without tapping into the miraculous. And I would
And I
add,
didn't mean it. I don't mean it as miraculous.
no, I understand that you didn't. I absolutely understand that you didn't. And the last piece of it is sometimes the prayer is because either we've done all that we can and sort of we acknowledge that there are things that are beyond our control, or sometimes we can't do as much as we might want to because of geography or other limitations. We all know family and friends who, if we live closer to them, we would help them without a second thought, especially if they were struggling with something. But we don't always have the luxury of being present. And so you can reach out and call them and listen. If what they want to do is howl at the moon because they're hurting. See, somebody's calling. Or you can offer them words of encouragement. But sometimes that feels insufficient.
Oh,
But it's all that you can do. A close friend of mine is going through a series of treatments, and I can't drive her to an appointment. I can't pick up some groceries for her. Fortunately, there's enough people in her orbit who can do those kind of things. So I'm left with calling and praying. And praying is sometimes the thing that you do when you don't have anything else, or you feel like you don't have anything else left that you can do. Okay, we've gone a little farther afield than I had anticipated, even with this group. No, if I didn't like the conversation, I would have nipped it in the bud. Okay, so Torah, in some ways, all right, and I think even the fact that this was a formula that he repeated often enough that it became to be, oh, what did Rabbi Shimon HaTzadik say? Oh, he always said these three things are the pillars upon which the world stands, right? But Torah to be truly internalized requires ongoing and repeated study. We read the Torah year after year after year, even in a triennial cycle. So we read it every 3 years, right? Does the Torah change? Do the words change? Right? What does change?
How we hear it.
How we hear it. Us, we change. I would hate to think that I have the same understanding of anything in Torah today that I did when I was 20, because it means I haven't grown. You know, every experience we have changes us a little bit. And so I come back to Torah because maybe I'll see something I missed before. I'll understand it in a way that's different. You know, I suppose, you know, when you're studying Torah as a teenager, maybe you understand Isaac and you're looking at Abraham going like, dude, what the hell? And then you become a father and maybe you understand Abraham a little differently, or any of the patriarchs. Okay, so I think part of the way he communicates the need for repetition is in fact just by engaging in repetition. And the study of Torah, I think for him, is really about not knowledge, but self-perfection. How do I become the best version of me behaviorally? You know, Judaism is, I won't say disinterested with what you think, but it's much more interested in what you do. You know, what's the old quip about, you know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions?
Robin's not in her office. It looked like,
Somebody is going to, it looked like Tesco going by.
oh,
to
maybe
open the
Tess
door.
was, okay.
Okay.
I like that.
1 second. Otherwise, that will continue
Mhm.
to ring.
Rabbi, use the word repeat. And respectfully.
Uh.
Every time we do Torah with you,
Hmm.
which is every morning minyan,
Hmm.
every Shabbat, etc., you stop, you don't repeat it. When you stop on a word, you stop on a phrase, you stop on a clause, and you'll sit there and say, okay, Rabbi so-and-so. So, but the thing is, I remember a bit that was done by Red Skelton,
I love Red Skill.
and he did the Pledge of Allegiance. And it's a great piece. If you haven't go to YouTube and go Pledge of Allegiance.
I will
And
search it out.
It's an excellent piece, because what he does is he takes every single word as to what it means.
Hmm.
And what happens is when you say it automatically, you don't stop to think about that particular phrase, or that particular prayer. And so when you break it down and you're saying this little word or this little phrase, it's sort of like, stop for a minute. I know you've heard this before, but.
And I'm going to take it a step farther, which is, why do I choose this guy's comment as opposed to that guy's comment?
Okay.
Because it speaks to me in the moment. Right? I'm, the Jody will tell you that I've had this 6-volume set for years and years and years. And for a while, she thought it was a 1-volume thing, not a 6-volume thing. She couldn't understand why I was constantly poring over it and writing notes. And I mean, the thing, I've created my own superstructure on top of the text. And I look at some of the things that I wrote or reacted to and go like, oh, because it's what's resonating at the moment. And you know, the way this book is structured, it's like, okay, here's this verse, and I'm going to give you 20 pieces or comments on this verse. And at any given moment, I'm going to like some and dislike some. And I don't know that that's a comment about the commentator's words as much as my mood or feeling at that moment. I mean, I will tell you that even today, so Sunday night, one of the things that I do is I look at and think about what I want to teach on Monday morning in that little snippet. And there are any number of Sunday nights when I'll put a tab in multiple places going like, well, maybe this, I'll see how I feel in the morning. And literally, I'll look at them in the morning and go like, oh, this one.
You
So
slept on it.
well, yes, sometimes I've literally slept on it, but I try not to. It's a wonderful series of volumes, but it's not a good pillow. Right? And by the way, that sense of repetition kind of flies in the face of modernity, where the idea of seen it, heard it, done it, give me something new. That's that on one level, that's not Shimon HaTzadik's model. And he's not saying, and that's not how you study Torah necessarily. So yes, I may look at, you know, Torah and go, okay, here's my, this year I'm going to study it with this guy's commentary or that guy's commentary. So there is a newness to it, but I'm still coming back to the basic essential original. And that original is the thing that's immutable and is the basis for anything else that happened. As opposed to, oh yeah, I read that book. And we all have favorite novels or books that we reread, but there are a whole lot of others. Well, oh yeah, I read that already. I don't feel the need to
Go back.
reread it. Whether even if I enjoyed it, I just like, okay. It was a good experience, done.
Been there, done that.
Been there, done that. You know, and there are certain movies that we don't mind seeing over and over again. There are certain songs that we don't mind hearing over and over again. And there are others where, you know, oh, that's on, and you start pushing the buttons to change the station. And by the way, as it has gotten easier and easier, we do it more and more. Okay, so remember the day when your choices were ABC, NBC, CBS, and PBS.
Yep.
And if you wanted to change, you had to get up out of your chair, walk across the room, and go click.
And change the antenna.
Oh, yeah.
And yes, that's probably true too.
With aluminum foil, and you stay there, Sam. Hold the antenna there.
Yeah, no, I was already sort of in a cable world, but there's still and also pondering like, okay, there's a lot more numbers on this dial than I need.
Yes, I can remember when I was little thinking, because I won a TV when I was in first grade.
Wow.
Okay,
Woohoo.
yeah.
You were
Fancy.
when? You won it when?
When I was in first grade. It was my dad, we went to his Christmas party and they pulled your name. You got to pick a prize. Well, they didn't tell us which way to go. I was in first grade, so I ran over and threw my arms around a TV. You think they're gonna take it away from a 6-year-old?
No. She was smart then too.
And I used to wonder why why are there so many more numbers and there's not something there? Cause I
Hope-
didn't
hope-
understand
hope for-
transmission and.
Hope for the future. Now you couldn't have enough of a dial to cover all the channels.
No, you couldn't.
Okay, so repetition becomes a pillar and a cornerstone. Let's now come back to avodah, worship. And it's fascinating that, obviously he couches it in the temple sacrificial system because that was the reality of his day. But what's absent from the temple worship of his day? No. He put study of Torah as the first thing, so, okay, so think about what you know about the sacrificial system in the ancient temple.
Pretty bloody. Is it kindness to animals? I don't know. Is it gimel to hasadim? I don't know.
No, I'm gonna have to go and.
Well, those are the three things, right? Torah,
The three X.
and the gimel hasadim. Those are the
Okay.
three things the world
All right,
depends upon.
All right, so in the morning, the sun is rising. Who is tasked with the daily worship in the temple?
The high priest.
It's the priest.
The Kohanim, yes, absolutely. The high priest was in charge. The other Kohanim were functional enough to do some of the daily stuff. Each person had their roles. They had function. Okay. That was the daily morning sacrifice, the daily evening sacrifice. So who's missing?
The people.
People. Us. What's my role in the whole thing?
Just bring an unblemished
Nothing.
time.
Yeah, I'm gonna go
Great.
even with the nothing, well, not quite nothing, because my job is to provide for the maintenance and upkeep of the sacrificial system, which the Kohanim perform on behalf of the nation, so as to keep us good with God. That's the point of the system, right? My role is somewhat removed. Yeah, Barbara.
So does that mean that somebody brought sacrifices every day?
The Kohanim brought a sacrifice every morning and a sacrifice every evening on behalf of the collective Jewish people.
By whom? By whom? Did they
Who-
appoint a person each day, or how did that work?
In terms of the mechanism of who actually did,
Yes.
there was a lottery system. In other words, the Kohanim would go through a lottery system to say, okay, the lottery, okay, so today your task is to clean out the ashes from last night. Your task is to bring the branches. Your task is to go down to the pens where we keep the animals and bring up a sheep. Your job is to prepare the hot water that we're going to need in order to clean the animal and get the hairy part off, right?
But this,
There are a whole myriad of tasks, right? But all of it was done by Kohanim on behalf of the nation.
but the sacrifices, the actual animals or the grain was brought on the festivals and kept and
Okay,
then
so,
you
okay,
daily.
so let's bring the people into it, all right? Daily, weekly, it's happening without us. All right? On pilgrimage festivals, I was expected to make an appearance and bring my sacrifice along. And, for the Kohanim, it was all hands on deck because all of a sudden, instead of doing like one sacrifice, we've got thousands that need to be done to serve the needs of the people. There's also sacrifices that people brought situationally. So, for example, if you remember the story of Hannah that we read on Rosh Hashanah, Hannah used to go up with her husband Elkanah and her sister wife Penina, and the family would make an annual pilgrimage to the temple in which they would have a celebratory sacrifice and they would enjoy that meal together, incorporating the whole family and certain other guests. So on that annual occasion, you brought your sacrifice, or if you lived far away, you went to there was a marketplace at the base of the temple and you could shop and buy, okay, I need wine, I need grain, I need this. We've got everything. For everything the discerning worshiper could want is available in the marketplace in Jerusalem. But that was an annual event. Same way the pilgrimage festivals were annual events. And even with those, you placed your hands on the offering to indicate your possession of it and your sharing of it with the temple. But everything else was done without you. The only liturgical formula that the Torah describes is when in the book of Deuteronomy, when you brought your first fruits to the temple, you would hand them to the Kohanim, and there was a formula that you recited, Arami Oved Avi Vayered Mitzrayma Vayagar Sham. If this sounds like Pesach, it's because the rabbis took the one piece of liturgy that the average run-of-the-mill ordinary Israelite farmer would know, and they built on it. Right? If I want to teach you something, it's easier for me to do it on top of a foundation of something that you already know. So first I teach you math, and then I teach you multiplication. Okay. So we had a limited role and participation in worship. If we define worship purely in terms of the temple, right? Now, my translator did that, okay? Avodah meant, in the ancient world, worship in the temple. But the term worship and the term avodah have potentially broader meanings. Worship can encompass everything. Okay? If I view Torah as a blueprint for how to live in a way that allows me to aspire to godliness, then everything I do is an act of worship. Studying Torah is an act of worship. Prayer is an act of worship. That one's a little more obvious because we think of that as worship. Building a sukkah is a form of worship. Fulfillment of any mitzvah is worship. And Rabbi Tamar Eldad Applebaum actually takes avodah in its most literal sense, because it means work. And she takes it in the sense of work in the ancient world, which meant that you were a farmer. You were engaged with the land. You tilled it, you planted, you watered, you weeded, you reaped, right? Avodah, and I'm not giving her complete justice in how I'm about to do this. Avodah is about our engagement with the natural world. And she's taking it all the way back to the Garden of Eden. You remember Adam and Eve? Yeah. What's their job description? Le'ovda u'leshomra. I put you in this garden, le'ovda u'leshomra. Avodah, to work it. So so her suggestion is not kind of out there in left field. It's just not the one we usually associate with worship. And so she introduces this whole idea about how, and she does it through the prism of one of the early Zionists, Olive Dalet Gordon, who talks about how Jews over the centuries became so urbanized and detached from the land that the only way we can become a people, a fully functional people again, is to reconnect with the land. And that was the whole mantra of the early Zionists. We're going to build the land, we're going to work the land, and we're going to become built by that. I've sort of left little time to talk about acts of chesed because
There's no one in the office.
Oh, okay, thank you. Because those are the most self-explanatory, but they're also about the ultimate articulation of Torah and avodah in the sense of worship, because it's how I take the values inherent in those places into my interpersonal relationships and my behavior towards other people. So on one level, his three pillars are interlocked. Torah defines how you do worship. Torah is the blueprint for worship that finds expression in acts of chesed. And then you repeat the whole thing. That's it for today. Though I will happily entertain questions.
Good. In the New Testament, there is, how shall we pray? And that's the question asked of Jesus, and follow with that with the Lord's Prayer. If I remember correctly in Torah, the one prayer I remember is an agricultural prayer. It's one of the few that I can remember in Torah as a prayer itself, with that caption. You gotta look, so I may be wrong.
No, I'm trying to think of, tell me what you're thinking of, because it's not coming to my mind.
I just remember because it's explicit. It's one it's rare for the Torah to have an explicit prayer, and it's an agricultural prayer. And but I can't give you the chapter and verse.
No, just give me a few words even.
I can't even do that one. I would say
Okay.
it's the book of Numbers, but I don't remember. I could be wrong. Another time.
I'm gonna think.
But the other one is how to pray. We all pray, we pray in different ways. And so when you say study Torah, and then leads to prayer, I have difficulty with that link. In terms of how to, not the idea about praying. And I mean, like, for example, I like Abraham Joshua Heschel's. That one line is, which, I mean, I love that one, which is when you pray, it draws you closer to God and closer to the person in prayer.
Mhm.
I love that thought. To me, it's a wonderful thought. Then the other one is, you should love the Lord God with all your heart, with all your soul, and all your mind. And that's when you say your prayer, not by rote, but you say that prayer with your mind and your heart.
But I think there's the might part of it, to me, also becomes behavioral.
Of course.
And I think Heschel would say prayer is an essential form of worship.
Yeah.
It's not the essential form of worship,
Oh, I agree with that.
right? Because you need all of the other pieces, because worship is limitless. How I serve God is worship.
The ultimate.
And, you know, to sort of bring it back to where you started, where we started way back when, why do I do it? You know, I have two choices. I serve God out of awe, you know, with a slight overtone of fear, or I serve God out of love. The first is acceptable. The second is ideal.
Okay. But the other, for a second. First thing in the morning, you're supposed to say the Shema. The last thing you say at the end of the day is Shema. Why do you do that? Because it's rote, but on the other hand, it gives you an importance at the beginning of the day. Do you say prayers during the day? Yes, my shortest prayer is thank you, God. Okay, that's probably the most frequent prayer I say during the day. So when do you say that? You say the prayers at different times because it gives you meaning and significance. It's not necessarily rote, but the reason for the rote is also because you remember the importance of prayer during the day.
Rote also look, there's certain advantages to rote. Familiarity is one. Rote also creates reminders. You know, if I, you know, say a bracha before I have my coffee, that's like a speed bump.
Okay.
All right. Any blessing sort of functions as that speed bump, so I don't zoom past it and go, oh, don't take for granted the fact that you've got a cup of coffee. Don't take for granted that you've got an apple. Don't take for granted that you're eating 3 cookies that you shouldn't. Don't take for granted anything. All right. Express appreciation. Why did the rabbis create all these blessings that are triggered by things you hear, you see, you smell? Because they want you to have that moment of pause and appreciation. You see a magnificent mountain. Like, wow. Like last summer, not this past summer, the summer before that, Miriam spent the summer at the Grand Canyon working. And she sent back pictures, and I'm going like, wow, these are just amazing. You know, but I'm not going to say a bracha over a picture. But I'm going like, I can't wait to be able to stand there and feel this moment of incredible awe that will trigger my reciting a blessing.
That because however much you enjoyed those pictures, the real thing will knock you out.
That's right.
Take your breath away.
I thought that in Zion National Park.
Oh, yeah.
I said my prayers on when I was looked at over there.
Well, we talk about that all the time, every time we travel. We've seen this when we were riding the motorcycle over the Going to the Sun Road in Glacier Park.
Okay.
And I saw all these things I've seen in newsreels and that, and I'm John's keeping his eyes on the road and I'm on the back of the bike going,
Thank you.
oh, God, oh, God.
We were saying prayers to different, for different outcomes.
Yes, yes, I will say that, yeah, I'm thinking, last summer Jody and I drove, along, the Blue Ridge Skyway,
Yeah, Blue Ridge Skyline Drive
Skyline Drive.
or Blue Ridge Parkway.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah,
one way it's one.
I understand.
one way is the other, yeah, so I can tell you for sure, prayers were said. All right, absolutely prayers were said. And not always, but the same with each person, because we were not always looking at the same thing.
Your comment earlier about faith being every day, being a part of each day, keeps it alive as opposed to, it's like hot and cold water. You turn it on, then you turn it off, and I'm going like, no. If you have the thing that you make it a part of every day, it gives you a certain meaning and significance as to your identity. Same thing in Jewish identity or Christian identity.
But you have to make it part of your everyday.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, very much. so.
Otherwise, it doesn't work.
No. No, no.
Rabbi,
Yes, Barbara?
to change to a very practical question, what book are you using? Is-
Okay,
Is,
so
is the class
There's-
using?
there are three possibilities. Okay, I will start with the most familiar. Right?
Is that
Right.
central,
That's our Lev Shalem Siddur.
okay,
Okay, starting on page 235, they have Pirkei Avot.
okay,
And the commentary that accompanies it is an abridgment of this, which is a third volume in the Lev Shalem series, which is a Pirkei Avot commentary created by Rabbi Gordon Tucker and by Rabbi Tamar Eldad Applebaum. And
okay,
excerpts of their commentary are in here, in the Lev Shalem Siddur version.
okay,
And the third one that I'm using is the Koren Pirkei Avot, with a commentary written by Rabbi, blanking on his first name, Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory, who was the chief rabbi of England
Right.
for a period of time.
Yeah.
Right, so
thank you.
those are the three.
I love Rabbi
This
Sachs.
one, obviously, the Lev Shalem is the most easily
Accessible.
accessible.
Yes.
Because I'm reading,